Hello, everybody. I am Louise Edington, the Cosmic Owl of Cosmic Owl Astrology, and I'm here today to talk to you about the Mars-Pluto square that is happening tomorrow, September the 24th. I'm recording this on September the 23rd. Now, I have quite a lot to say about that, but I'm going to go back and look at where this cycle started. I'm going to talk about Mars-Pluto squares in general. I'm going to talk a little bit about what it's like living with a Mars-Pluto square, because I live with one. I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think this one's different, as every cycle is slightly different. History doesn't repeat, it rhymes, right? But as usual, I've pulled some cards, and I will also read the symbols for this Mars-Pluto square. But I'll give you a glimpse of the cards before I go and look at the astrology. So, got the 10 of Blades, 3 of Cups, and the 10 of Cups. So, let's begin. Now then, I'm not saying any of this will be easy because we're still under the eclipse energy, and those eclipses were kind of wild. I described it as like being in a washing machine, which was what somebody else said to me, and I also had likened it to being like in the middle of a storm, like it's swirling around you. Somebody else I know said that it was a bit like scrambled eggs. It's intense, this energy, but we are moving past probably the one of the most intense months of this year for sure, and also and one of the most intense years that we've ever lived through. So let's look at some astrology. So I'm going to go back and look at some cycles, then I'm going to look at the actual chart itself for this square as it's happening. But this cycle began on February the 14th, 2024 at 0 degrees Aquarius. Now that is a really hot degree. A friend and client of mine, Dawn Hild, and I made a video on my YouTube channel a little while back. I'm going to link to it. You'll see it pop up, but also if you can search for it on my channel. It was called Fools and Lovers. We looked at all the occasions that we had big events happening at 0 Aquarius, because it's a really hot degree. Incidentally, Dawn and I are going to meet again at the beginning of October to kind of build on that video that we made then, looking at the 6 degree Aquarius mark even more. But anyway, this 0 degree Aquarius, huge degree. December the 21st, 2020 or 2021, I can't remember exactly. No, it's 2020. We had the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn at 0 Aquarius. Now that conjunction happens every 20 years, but that conjunction back then was the first conjunction in an air sign for the next 200 years. They'll all the great conjunctions every 20 years will be in air signs for 200 years. So that was huge. And so it was called the Great Mutation. It was changing from a 200-year period of Earth conjunctions into air conjunctions. Then we've also had several other conjunctions. We had a Venus-Mars conjunction at 0 Aquarius. We also had a conjunction of Venus, Ceres, and Pluto at 0 Aquarius on December the 7th, 2024. And we had this conjunction. Now, what these things are cycles. So the conjunction of two planets is the start of a synodic cycle where the two work together. Now, I'm not going to go through every every conjunction, but we are having the kind of openings and closings of some of those cycles that began at 0 Aquarius. Now, this one will be a closing square. But let's look at this first of all. So February the 14th, 2024, the world was very different, right? And particularly if you think of American elections and things like that. But there was already the Ukraine war was happening. There was already the Middle East situation in Gaza, and all those things were already happening. Then on June the 11th, 2024, everything began to really change. Of course, Mars and Pluto did not work, they're not working completely alone, right? But this was the opening square, June the 11th, summer of 2024. After that time, Biden stepped down, Harris stepped up, things began to really shift and change. And this was the opening square. And this is all in fixed signs. So this is like tension, change. Then, if you can see, Uranus was still in Taurus back then. Jupiter was back in Gemini. It's now in Cancer. Um, Lots of other things happening, of course. And so, but Mars was in Taurus, which is, very stuck in its ways, very determined to stick to what its values are. And Pluto was retrograde. Okay. So is there anything else I wanted to tell you? Yes, you can see that Mars and Pluto were square, and how Maya had moved fully into Scorpio, and this was forming a fixed T-square. Then we had oppositions. So that was like the opening quarter, the crisis in action phase. A lot of action, a lot of things began to change. Then we got to November the 3rd, and we had a Mars-Pluto opposition. At that point, Pluto had moved back into Capricorn, and Mars was in Cancer, and that was at the anaretic degree. Now we've just had anaretic degree eclipse, an occultation of Venus, and Mars was at the anaretic degree in Libra on the solar eclipse that was just a couple of days ago. But this was end times, this was finishings, and so fulfillment, full moon. But it wasn't the only, and all change, right? 2 days later, the American election. But then it wasn't the only opposition. We had 3 oppositions in this very tense time. Now, opposition, so we had Cancer, Capricorn, end times of the structures and of feeling safe and secure. But then on January the 3rd, Mars and Pluto opposed each other again, and Pluto was at 1 degree Aquarius, where Pluto is now, because Pluto then moved on and is now retrograde back at 1. And this was entirely different. Now, this one was forming a T-square to Vesta and Haumea. Vesta is the state, and Haumea is regeneration. Now, this was entirely different to a T-square from Taurus to Aquarius to Scorpio. This one is the fulfillment, the opposition. This is kind of looking at major tension, forcing some big changes coming. All right. Then we had, on April the 26th, a third and final opposition, still in Leo, still in Aquarius. And now this one, still square Haumea, but not squaring anything else. This was the final opposition. Pluto was now direct and moving forward. Mars was moving forward. Mars was going to go retrograde in Leo, but this was kind of a finishing moment. In some ways, it was a yeah, it's a bit wide, but no, it is the sun. You could say this was a very tense fixed grand cross or grand square. Okay, that was a very dynamic moment back then. But bring us to, oh, sorry. I'm actually gonna whiz past and then come back to the square. So tomorrow we have the last quarter square, and I'll come back to that and talk more about it in a moment. But next January, on the 27th, 2026, we will have the start of a new cycle in Aquarius. And this is something that Dawn and I might look at more when we do a video, because look at all this Aquarius energy and look at Vesta with the sun. This is an entirely new beginning, a new cycle of Mars and Pluto, a new cycle of Vesta and the sun, a new cycle of Mercury and Venus. Wow. Pallas Athena will have left Aquarius by then and be moving into Pisces, so kind of helping us to plan and see the big picture, and as we move into this unity consciousness of interconnectedness. Okay. At this point, by the time of the new cycle beginning, Uranus will be about to station direct and move fully into Gemini for the next about 7 years. Saturn has not quite moved back into Aries, but Neptune is already there, and Saturn is about to join Neptune at that 0 Aries, that world point. I'm not going to go into full detail with all of these, but those two are about to start a new cycle. Uranus and Sedna will be about to start a full new cycle as Uranus starts to move ahead of Sedna. Right now, as we speak, Uranus is retrograde and so is Sedna, but Uranus didn't quite hit Sedna. It's gone back into Taurus to kind of finish things up. And Pluto and Haumea are heading towards yet another square of 13 squares this decade that finishes with the first square in 2028. So this will be heading towards the last 3 squares of Pluto and Haumea. Death and rebirth and regeneration, okay, happening. Now, this is all kind of important to kind of just tune into a little bit. I don't want you to get too tied up with it. Yes, there's some asteroids on there and they are very connected with this last quarter square. The other thing I'll mention though is that Ceres has gone all the way back to Aries, where she's stationed direct at the Venus star point from March the 22nd. Sorry, March the 22nd, 2025, and is almost out of the point where she stationed retrograde in 2025. So she's about to tread new ground as well. But also, you know, look at this, Venus and the sun. We will actually be under a new Venus star point, though the cycles never completely end. Just before the new cycle of Mars and Pluto begins, Venus and the sun have a superior conjunction at 16 Capricorn. Obviously, I'll talk a lot more about that later because I always work with Venus star points, but that one's conjunct Mars in the sign of Capricorn. And there's a lot to say about that, but it is a superior direct conjunction. That is learning something from the last retrograde conjunction, which was, oh gosh, I should have got the I should have got that up for you now, but let me see if I can find the oh, I thought I had it pinned every time. Anyway, it's find your Venus star point. So I just get it up again quickly because we need to know when that was. The last Capricorn star point. So we'll be leaving that 2 Aries star point, or having a kind of full Venus from that 2-degree Aries star point from March the 22nd, 2025. But the last Capricorn star point was January the 8th, 2022. This will kind of be a full moon from that star point. And so it will be kind of reaching another point of fulfillment. So can you see how a lot of cycles are kind of either finishing or starting to finish or ending? We are really at the end times, and there's so many things that tell us that. Okay, so all that to say, new cycle starts next January with lots of other new cycles, and things are about to radically change in ways we've never experienced in our lifetimes. But to come back to tomorrow, to this last quarter square. So here you have Mars in Scorpio, square Pluto. You can see that Pluto is retrograde again. Pluto actually stations direct quite soon. So when is that? October the 13th. So Pluto is, Pluto will station direct at 1 degree 22 minutes of Aquarius, and Pluto is at 1 degree 27 minutes of Aquarius right now. So even though it's not right in the retrograde zone, it's getting very close. So Pluto is slowing down. You can see if you go to now, you can't see, but I will tell you. If I click on Pluto on my software, it will tell me that Pluto is moving really slow at the moment, and it is. And so here we have this square of Mars and Pluto, but it's not the only thing. Look at this. All at 1 degree. The moon, the Scorpio moon, is 2 minutes, solar arc minutes, from conjuncting Mars as Mars squares Pluto. Haumea is at 1 degree of Scorpio as well. This is a potent closing square. Now, you might hear quite a lot about how Mars-Pluto squares can be violent. They can be. I've looked at them and looked at the potency of past squares in the past, and there's always often violence around. They can be more assertive and more aggressive, that's for sure. And Mars Pluto squares in general are really kind of, what can we say, they are very kind of determined and pushy. I have a Mars Pluto square natally. Now, there is often significant tension between outward actions, Mars, and deep unconscious drives, Pluto. And that can bring intense inner conflict, and it can bring repressed power struggles. It can bring intense desire, intense fear. It can be found in themes of abuse, either being the abuser or being abused. And don't get stuck on this because I have theories about the signs it's in. and domination, intense physical or sexual energy that requires conscious management and transformation to prevent destructive tendencies and to harness its regenerative potential. Now let's hold on to that word. Okay. So, I think there's levels of consciousness involved here. When I was very young, having being totally unconscious of being born with a Mars-Pluto square in different signs, though, there were times I could be rather overly assertive, but it was usually in response to people trying to exert their control and power over me. Okay. Not saying it was right to respond in the way I did sometimes, but I was not generally the attacker. For example, on social media, Facebook at the time, I don't do this anymore, but I'm quite political. I was way more vocally political back then. But I would post things and my wall was open, and people would come, and usually kind of men, and they would kind of really have a go at me, and I would just tell them to go, um and so it can be that. And I was told I'd got anger issues, and because I was an activist and things like that, but my Mars is in Sagittarius. So but anger is an energy. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Well focused energy can be very potent and transformative, and you can exert your will to good effect. Now, a closing square, which this one is a crisis in consciousness. And so this is, I think, affecting our collective conscience in so many ways. Now let's come to the signs. Here we have Mars in Scorpio. Mars is the traditional guide for the sign of Scorpio. Pluto is the modern guide for the sign of Scorpio. So this is a very scorpionic closing square in a water sign and an air sign. So you can think how water and air do not really mix, or how air can really churn up the waters, the oceans, and so on and so forth. Weather could be a little bit stormy. It kind of is already. But think about the themes that's going on in the world, the power struggles. Scorpio is often a place of power struggles, of manipulation, of really deep empowerment, but also of power over rather than power from within. What was it I was listening to? Steve Judd the other day. He said he would rather be power filled, not powerful. Think of that as you work with this energy, because this is a square of deep self empowerment. It can be Scorpio, though, can be cruel, can be about desire and depth, but it's also intense and transformative and loyal and determined and resourceful. It can be really power filled. Now let's go to the energies that it's with. It's with the moon, which is in mundane astrology, the people. It's also conjunct Haumea, which is pure regenerative energy and rebirthing. Think of those three together. Is this not a most powerful drive to regenerate, to rebirth, to become power filled? And as all these energies then move towards Pluto, towards that next conjunction, to really transform and change from the inside out to create the future, starting at 3 Aquarius next year. it's a closing square as well, so it's also about going within and letting go of all those things that don't allow you to be power filled. It's also got kind of a psychic surgeon energy. Mars in Scorpio, Moon, the people, wanting to get to the bottom and delve down into those shadows of the power over structures and turf them out. This could be more talk about releasing the Epstein files for example. It could mean the survivors coming forward with the names that they had already suggested they might do. All of those things are potential of this. And every single one of these energies is moving towards Pluto. And in fact, on the square, they are moving towards each other. So this is moving towards a resolution and a completion, to my mind. Does that mean it will all be easy? Of course not. You know, this is intense, intense and passionate and emotional energy. But collectively, with the moon there, it implies the people might really begin to step into this power filled energy of saying, not on my watch. You know, I'm really starting to stand up. I think we are witnessing that more and more in the world, but they're kind of standing up in a very different way than they used to. There are still a lot of protests, a lot of marches, but people are realizing that the real change comes from the inside out and the bottom up, if you like. Okay, now we do have a flotilla of boats heading towards Gaza to, I'm not sure what they're actually going to do, but they're civilian boats to protest what's happening in Gaza, the genocide. And they have been named a Hamas flotilla by Israel. So, you know, that is a little tense, very, very tense and power struggle situation as well. That's another example of it. But those people in this flotilla, which is quite large, I believe, I think they're due there on Saturday, maybe. I'm recording this on Wednesday. But they are really determined and devoted and determined to change, bring the change, to be power filled, to sail on the ocean seas, Scorpio water, to help to bring about a better future, right? Oh, so there's just so much going on here. It's huge. And I don't think we can leave Haumea out of this one, because she is said to be similar nature to Pluto, which is usually seen as death and rebirth, but I always see as kind of not just literal death and rebirth. It's kind of death of the old self, of peeling off layers of the onion, if you like, to get to the core, the root, your inner gold, and finding your inner buried treasure. That's always how I've experienced Pluto transits myself. Okay, so we have that square. This is powerful, and it's moving towards Aquarius, where Urania is now. And Urania is, well, she is an asteroid. Urania is, she is said to be associated with astrology, but I'll come up with Uranian astrology, which is not really what I wanted. But Urania, it represents the connection to cosmic understanding and celestial wisdom. She was named for the Greek goddess of astronomy. This is kind of like tuning into the collective cosmic energy. I watched an amazing workshop. Well, I didn't watch it. I took part in an amazing workshop with the great astrologer Rick Levine last weekend, talking about the metaphysical or quantum nature of both science, the cosmos, and astrology, and about looking at, you know, the chart as a more metaphysical quantum energy, which is what I am passionate about. And I have been, working towards that for quite some time. But Urania is a big part of that. Okay, she is our actual relationship with cosmic awareness. Urania is not just like the mind knowing keywords and things. She is really about the connection with the cosmos, and having that strong curiosity about the cosmos. So Urania suggests that people often have a keen interest in philosophy, mathematics, which is what, it's all symbols of numbers, and astrology is symbols, and the music of the spheres, which is how they play together with each other. So, really, this is about tuning into celestial wisdom. She is also about aspiration and inspiration. Urania lifts the soul and spirit through the power of the imagination, thought, and curiosity about the heavens. And she is the astrologer's muse. Now, then, going back to this chart, having Pluto and Urania there in aspect to each other, and the fact that Urania is where we are moving towards for the next cycle of Mars and Pluto, starting, she's in at that degree. This suggests to me that we are really coming into this unity consciousness, and I do not mean just unity consciousness between humans. And when I say unity consciousness, I don't mean all being in agreement. I just mean this real acknowledgement that everything is connected. We are interconnected with the whole of the cosmos. Everything is working together in a more plasmatic waveform than particle. Rick Levine can go into that way more than I can. And in fact, after I've uploaded this, I think I'll upload an interview I did with Rick Levine last year for a quantum astrology gathering I put on. But this is also suggesting to me that as we become more and more aware that we are in this quantum realm, which is more plasma or wave or whatever you want to call it, than particle. In fact, that particles really kind of almost don't exist except by the observer. In other words, we are kind of observing our reality, and that's what makes it appear to be real, including ourselves. It's kind of mind-blowing, all this quantum physics, but this is what the quantum science is telling us. And empirical science is realizing that empirical science doesn't actually fully tell the story, even where they thought it did. There's always slight anomalies and so on. Rick didn't really go into this in his workshop, but it comes to my mind that if this is the case, that we can truly change our state of consciousness to co-create the world we want, starting with our own world, right? Law of attraction, whatever you want to call it, cause and effect. But all these planets are pointing to a rise in consciousness that we've never experienced before. Or let's call it an expansion of consciousness, a place we have never been before. Now then, this brings me to the rest of this chart. So we also have this kite. We have this mini grand trine, whatever you want to call it, grand sextile. Some people, that's like, yeah, that's not that. Anyway, we have this air grand trine. I should have put yeah, so if we join those two as well, yeah, you can see there — Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. they're not as exact as they will be next year, but they're pretty close right now, speaking to each other. Uranus and Pluto both at 1 degree, and Neptune back at 0 degree, but only just pretty much. And then the Sun at 1 Libra, the very core of ourselves. So we have this air grand trine, and this here is another asteroid. This is the asteroid Karma. Now then, karma gets very misinterpreted as almost like punishment, right? But karma is basically saying it's past actions and consequences for both good and bad. And so, it's the law of cause and effect in many ways, right? Okay, so another natural law of the cosmos, which is what the law of attraction is. So this is really kind of showing us that we are being shown the karmic effects of all our actions, no matter how small, no matter how large, as a collective, as the world, as humans, of how we've worked with the earth. I would say this is on that level, because these are all the slow moving planets. So we have that kite, air, which is moving into new ideas, new communication, new voice, all of those kind of things, but also blowing away the past. Then we have Neptune in Aries as the string of the bow, moving into that state of interconnectedness from the inside out, Aries. And then we have all this. This is aspecting all of this. So the Moon, Mars, and Haumea are in a, let me maybe do a different color line. Let me do a green line. So I would say that this is a quincunx to this. And then this is a quincunx to this. This makes this a finger of fate or God happening as they there we go, happening as everything else is happening. Okay, so this is a finger of destiny pointing at the Moon, Mars, and Haumea, regeneration, pure regeneration from Uranus, the great change bringer, radical change and shifting, and Neptune in Aries, moving into that more interconnectedness from the inside out, realizing that its change starts within, but then we are interconnected with everything else that we think we know. So this is a finger of destiny. 1 Scorpio is a finger of destiny right now. It's square Pluto, it's aspecting Uranus, Neptune. It's also semi-sextile to the Sun and that asteroid Karma. And so the key characteristics of a semi-sextile are potential integration, requiring conscious choice and self-awareness to bridge the gap between the two energies. Now then, the Sun, well, the Moon is the fastest moving object, so the Moon is gaining light. This is almost exactly 30 degrees, so the Moon is gaining light after that eclipse we just had. But the Sun moves faster than Mars, so the Sun is catching up to Mars, okay? And so that is bringing some integration and growth, or the potential of it, from the Sun and the Moon, our two lights, the people and the core, the individual, if you like, our feelings and our ego, healthy ego, our core self. This is a huge opportunity here for everybody to kind of step into being in that place of being power filled and saying, we can change this. Okay. And we can regenerate and we can change, we can grow. I don't know if I can say any more really. This is massive, this square. Please don't, just listen to reductive takes that say this could be violent. As I said, I have a Mars-Pluto square natally, and I know that it gives me this huge power for change, growth, and transformation. It always has done. I didn't always use it in that way, but we have the free will to respond to this energy in that way. Okay. Now then, let me read to you the symbols for this Scorpio placement. So we go to Scorpio 2, we always go up. And in fact, no, I'm going to read the Sabian first. And so the Scorpio 2, I'm reading from Dane Rudyard's interpretation. A delicate bottle of perfume lies broken, releasing its fragrance. The keynote is the accidental nature of opportunities that impel, not compel. The planets impel, they do not compel, right? One to break away from a past, the remembrance of which is still poignant and cherished. He then goes on to say, a new and greater realization usually demands the sacrifice of something which has brought loveliness and fragrance to a lesser form of living and feeling. Old feelings are poignantly remembered, even as one moves into a new and wider sphere of experience. Old relationships may be left behind, but the memory of their essential moments linger on, perhaps strong and nostalgic, and that can be your relationship with yourself, the past self that you are leaving behind too. He says, to the excitement of novelty answers the memory of the graciousness of the past one has surrendered. So does that not indicate endings and beginnings? On to John Sandbacher's symbols. So the omega symbol, he says, is a manifesting and sensitive degree. This is a very sensitive, deeply sensitive aspect. But he says it's the omega symbol is a lighthouse, is moved in land. You have an ability to steer through the most confusing and turbulent of emotional waters. You sense where limits are and when retreat is the only safe action to take. You are drawn to helping other people, especially in exceedingly difficult situations. You are staunch and lofty and can be depended upon, for you're aware of the power and danger of illusions. And the Chandra symbol is a large, stately bronze horse. You hold on staunchly to your principles and can be very supportive of the people whose ideas and motives harmonize with your own. You're aware of power in all its forms and will do whatever you can to maintain your own. If you use your power to proliferate that which is positive and beneficial to both yourself and mankind, it will serve you well. If you fail to do this, though, you will eventually lose it. That's that asteroid karma, right? One of your biggest challenges is your tendency to be unbending. There are many situations in which your stubbornness may serve a positive purpose, but being rigid when you need to be flexible can create some of the greatest problems you will ever encounter. I'm not going to give my own interpretation of that. I let you take from that what is meant for you. But I do want to mention his Azoth symbol because I heard an interview with John Sandbach who said the Azoth symbol was like the IC, the very innermost feelings, okay, the bottom of the chart. he says, a spiritual leader carrying out a solemn public ritual which raises the vibrations of the populace. Again, I have hope. I know a lot of people don't. I had a conversation all about this the other day, but I still do. I think we're in the end days. And the cards indicate that again. I am finality, the 10 of Blades. I'll just read you some quotes. We must be willing to let go of the life we planned so as to have the life that is waiting for us. That is Joseph Campbell. Nobody can fall so low unless he has great depth. If such a thing can happen, it challenges the best and highest on the other side. That is to say, this depth corresponds to a potential height, and the blackest darkness to a hidden light. That's Jung. So the only thing to do now is to walk on, look toward your horizon and see the sun rising in all its brilliance. And so are you. This is a release, a liberation. This really is an ending, and it may feel overwhelming and shocking, and it may not feel like that liberation now, but it will if you just walk into your future where you will discover many fertile spaces. No, things are not as bad as you think they are, for this energy offers you renewal and rejuvenation. Well, why do I keep saying? Everything keeps telling me the same thing, really. Except we're in the end days now. So, the Three of Cups. I am joy. This is celebration. That my soul is full of longing for the secret of the sea, and the heart of the great ocean sends a thrilling pulse through me. And that's Longfellow. Now, John Lennon also said, we've got this gift of love, but love is like a precious plant. You can't just accept it and leave it in the cupboard, or just think it's going to get on by itself. You've got to keep watering it. You've got to really look after it and nurture. That was John Lennon, as I said. So this says, well, it says your heart is wide open to receiving and giving. Here lies love that is warmly wrapped up in deep gratitude, generosity, appreciation, and happiness. Okay. 10 of Cups. I am wholeness. But let there be spaces in your togetherness, and let the winds of the heavens dance between you. Love one another, but make not a bond of love. Let it rather be a moving sea between the shores of your souls. That's Khalil Gibran. Love is not a doing, but a state of being, a relatedness, a connectedness to another mortal, an identification with her or him that simply flows within me and through me, independent of my intentions or my efforts. And that was from the wonderful Robert A. Johnson. This is to be aware of the flow of love that resides within us, or brings us to a state of wholeness and harmony. We all know that finding happiness can sometimes be a tough ask. So when it's found, we need to throw a lot of gratitude at it, for the reality of life never allows us to hang on to the mythic happy ever after. What can I say? There's even good coming from this Mars-Pluto square, but not without tension and not without that energy of being power-filled, which you get to choose. So there we go. Mars-Pluto square, ending of a cycle, beginning of a very new one. Their next one is coming at 3 Aquarius early next year, and it will be part of what my colleague and I, Dawn, look at in early October. Bye.